Hello, I'm Nancy Stohlman, and I am here to answer your flash fiction questions. So today's question is it acceptable slash marketable to avoid traditional narrative structure, i.e. the rising arc to a climatic end, or can I go off on a tangent? So I have a two-part answer to this question as well. And I think this is a really interesting and common sort of question. So let me start with the tangent itself. So I like to think about, and I tell this to my students a lot, that I believe that we are the midwives of the story. We are in service of the story. So we are really here to help the story that wants to become be birthed into the world. So that's a very esoteric way of saying, does this tangent serve the story, or does it serve you, the author? If it serves you, the author, because you would like to write this tangent, then great, write that tangent in your journal in the morning. But it may not belong in the story. And I think that there's, at least 50% of what I write, probably more, 75% of what I write ends up in journals that nobody's going to see because I wanted to write it, because it felt good, because I loved it. And so I think those things should be written. They need to be written. But do they need to end up in your story? Are they serving the story, or are they serving you? Sometimes the tangents do serve the story. So I'm thinking about a story called Bigfoot Stole My Wife by Ron Carlson, and it's a little bit longer than a flash fiction story. But in this story, the narrator's wife is gone, and the narrator is basically saying, well, clearly Bigfoot took her. I mean, there's no other explanation. The car is gone. The Bigfoot must have taken the car. I mean, this is what happened. And then he goes off on this whole tangent about, when he was young and being in this mobile home, and the flood came, and the mobile home was moved 40 miles down the road, I believe. And as you're reading it, you're thinking, like, what does this have to do with Bigfoot at all? Why is he telling me this story? It's a funny story, but what's the point? And you realize later that the tangent really did serve the purpose of helping the reader realize the unreliability of that narrator. That narrator would tell you that his mobile home was moved 40 miles, just like he would tell you that his wife must have been kidnapped by Bigfoot. So there actually was a purpose for this tangent. It wasn't a self-indulgent sort of thing. So I would just ask yourself about any aspect of your story. Is it serving the story, or is it serving me, the author? If it's serving the author only, let it go. If it's serving the story, then the story will tell you that it needs it in there, and then it needs to be in there. Again, I think we are in service of our stories and not the other way around. So, is it marketable? Here's the other part of that question. Is it marketable? I think my answer to whether this is marketable or not is no. It's not marketable. And if we're writing for what's marketable, then we're really going to be chasing fashion, and fashion changes all the time. What was marketable 2 years ago or what was fashionable 2 years ago is not going to be fashionable 2 years from now. And if you're always trying to predict the fashion trend, then you can get caught up in a loop of attempting to write things that you think people want to read, rather than writing what is wanting to be written, rather than writing the story that's asking you to write it. So I personally think that that the best art comes from a place of needing to be written. It's necessary art, it's urgent, and the marketability is a whole other thing. The fashion of it is a whole other thing. You may write something that is very unfashionable when you write it, and then 2 years down the road, it's the most fashionable thing that could have ever been written, but you didn't write it to serve that need. So I know that that's not the answer that most people want to hear when they ask that sort of question, but I truly think that the best art is not fashionable. It's not marketable necessarily. If it happens to be marketable, great. But I would really ask yourself, what do you want to write? And if that weren't marketable, would you write it anyway? And if so, then write that, and write the best version of that there is. And I believe that art that's well written and coming from a place of urgency and necessity will find readers eventually. So write the story you want to read.